This does not come about, however, if they are regarded as heuristic principles which stand in a relationship of alternation and interaction. Nothing prevents us from attempting to trace any existing state of the world to the mental conditions that have produced it as a content of representations, just as nothing stands in the way of tracing these conditions to cosmic, historical or social facts which could give rise to a mind equipped with these powers and forms. The image of these facts, external to the mind, may again be derived from the subjective presuppositions of scientific and historical knowledge, and these again from the objective conditions of their origin, and so on ad infinitum. Of course, this knowledge is never realized in a clear-cut scheme. The two tendencies commingle in a fragmentary, interrupted and accidental way. But the principal contradiction is dissolved by an interpretation of both as heuristic principles. This transforms their opposition into an interaction and their mutual negation into an endless process of interaction. I will introduce here two other examples, one very specific and the other very general, in which relativity, i.e. the reciprocal character of the significance of criteria of knowledge, appears in the form of succession or alternation. The substantial interdependence of concepts and basic elements in images of the world is frequently represented by such a rhythm of reciprocal alternation in time. The relationship between the historical and the scientific method in economics can be interpreted in this fashion. It is certainly true that every economic process can be understood only in the context of a specific historical, psychological constellation. But such an insight is always based upon the presupposition of definite rule-following relationships. If we did not assume general conditions, universal drives, and regular series of effects as a basis for specific cases, there would not be any historical explanation at all. The whole would disintegrate into a chaos of atomized events. One may admit, nevertheless, that the universal regularities, which make the connection between the specific state or event and its conditions possible, depend in turn upon higher laws, so that they themselves are valid only as historical combinations. Other events and forces at an earlier stage have shaped things in us and around us, which now appear as universally valid and which give the causal elements of a later period their particular form. Thus, while these two methods, dogmatically stated and each claiming objective truth for itself, enter into irreconcilable conflict and mutual negation, they may assume an organic relationship in the form of alternation. Each becomes a heuristic principle, i.e. each has to be substantiated at every point of its application by an appeal to the other. The same is true for the most universal opposition in the process of cognition, between the a priori and experience. Ever since Cont we know that all experience, except for mere sense impressions, requires definite forms, inherent in the mind, by which the given is shaped into cognition. This a priori, which is brought by us to experience, must therefore be absolutely valid for all cognition and immune to any changes or to any possibility of correction by accidental sense experience. But the certainty that there are such norms is not matched by an equal certainty as to what these norms are. Much that was once considered a priori has later been recognized as an empirical and historical construct. On the one hand, we have the task of seeking in every phenomenon, beyond the content provided by sense impressions, the permanent a priori norms by which it is formed, but on the other, the maxim applies that we should attempt to trace every single a priori, but not the a priori as such, back to its source in experience. This mutual correspondence and dependence of methods is something totally different from the cheap compromise attained by combining methods, where the loss on one side is usually much greater than the gain on the other. Here we are concerned with the possibility of giving unlimited effectiveness to each part of the contrasted pair. And though each of these methods remains to some extent subjective, yet together, through the relativity of their application, they seem to express adequately the objective significance of things. Thus they correspond to the general principle in our investigation of value. Elements, each of which is subjective in its content, can attain their present objectivity through the form of their mutual relations. As we have seen above, mere sensory perceptions, by being connected with each other, can indicate or establish the object. The personality, a structure so solid that a specific spiritual substance was made its foundation, originates, at least for empirical psychology, through reciprocal associations and apperceptions that occur among the individual conceptions. These occurrences, subjective and fleeting, produce by their interactions what exists independently in none of them, namely, the personality as an objective element of the theoretical and practical world. So objective law develops by balancing the subjective interests and forces of individuals, by determining their place and dimensions, and by attaining the objective form of equity and justice through the exchange of claims and restrictions. In this way, objective economic value also crystallized out of subjective individual demands because the form of equality and of exchange was available, and because these relationships had an impartiality transcending subjectivity which the single elements lacked. Those methods of cognition may well be subjective and heuristic, but they approach, even though by an infinite process of evoking each other, the ideal of objective truth by the fact that each finds its supplement and therewith its legitimation through the other. Truth means the relationship between representations, which may be realized as an infinite construction, since, even if our knowledge is based upon truths that are no longer relative, we can never know whether we have reached the really final stage, or whether we are again on the road to a more general and profound conception, or it may consist in a reciprocal relation within these systems of representations, and its demonstration is also reciprocal. But these two processes of thought are related by a peculiar division of functions. It is necessary to consider our mental existence under two categories that complement each other, in terms of its content and in terms of the process that, as an event of consciousness, carries or realizes this content.